don't see. Oh, that's because Morgan is the one whose screen I'm looking at. Okay. Okay. Are we good to go, Morgan?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I'll take that brief burst of static to mean yes, I'm supposed to go ahead and start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the May 14th meeting of SIG Service Catalog. So before we jump into the agenda, does anybody have any brief topics, things they want to mention? Did we skip last week? I don't think anybody was here last week because of KubeCon.
That was 2 weeks ago.
Oh. Right. That was after KubeCon, but I was still on a plane, so I wasn't here.
Yeah, we skipped last week because anybody who had the authority to actually start the meeting was AOL. Or AWOL, sorry. Total slip of the tongue, I swear.
I've been out on leave in paradise.
Okay, well, I'm just going to get right into it then. So the first topic is actually something I wrote down. So user-provided services are a thing that I was familiar with because I used to work on Cloud Foundry, and they're a thing that exists there. They're not necessarily something that's in part of the OSB spec, and I was sort of aware that there was this thing over here. We had this UPS broker, but I wasn't really aware of like what it was intended to be used for, or how nice and robust it was. So I was taking a look at it, and it seems to me that it's pretty much just a toy. Like, it's nice if you have like some pre-existing database and you want to test out Service Catalog, see how it works, but it's not really, I wouldn't recommend anyone to actually use this to actually provision a user-provided service to accomplish useful work.
So Jonathan, can you elaborate and explain why it's a toy? What's missing in terms of functionality to make it real?
Everything.
Elaborate.
Literally everything. The thing that exists right now is a little thing that lives entirely in memory and keeps track of your stuff that you put in memory. It has no subsistence. It has no security. It has no reliability. It's not highly available. It's not scalable. Like, literally nothing about it is not a toy.
And it doesn't do async ops.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I certainly agree. I think it's a toy. And I think the thing was meant just for testing for, our quick walkthrough, that kind of thing.
Actually, it wasn't.
So I agree.
It wasn't, Doug?
No, it wasn't. It was meant to be a real live broker, just like Cloud Foundry has. The fact that it ended up being in this half-baked state, I think, is a mistake.
So this was all a bit before my time. I wasn't really around when this thing was originally concepted. This is just based on what I've been able to find by looking at it. And there isn't a whole lot of documentation on it either. So I do not really know what the intended use case was. We are interested in making user-provided services a feature in Service Catalog. So that was the first topic I wanted to broach. Is that true for anyone else?
Yes. I think so. I think Google would like that thing.
Okay. If we want to make user-provided services a feature, I was thinking of taking on the task of implementing it, but I wanted to just sort of touch base with the rest of the group because I see a couple different ways to move forward on that. I see your hand, Jeremy. Just give me just a second. One would be to take the current model where we have this UPS broker that's a sort of add-on and make that not suck. So make that like an actual full-fledged component, robust, reliable. Probably have to stick the data and probably the etcd somewhere so it doesn't just vanish when the thing goes down. A second option I thought of was merely sort of adding new validations that allow service instances to be created without an attached plan or class, which would allow you to manually create service instances and mark them as user-provided in some way. And the third option was to create an entire new object type user-provided service instance, which has no relation to the current service instance type. Jeremy?
Yeah, so I think we're interested in two types of things here. One would probably be like just that user provided service, and I think that maybe creating something that's just in a resource type without a full-fledged broker would probably be sufficient for that. On the on a related note, we're also interested in providing like a registration feature where we can take a managed instance, but we also want to like unbind to be able to create new like users for that database. So I started working on a broker, and I haven't had time to work on it in a little bit. There's like an empty repo in the OSB kit called BYOB, and it was supposed to be bring your own broker, where you could bring like a Postgres or some other database that's provisioned like in the cloud, and you like register the credentials like you would for a UPS, but then go that one extra step of like actually going and creating users inside of it. So it's like UPS plus plus.
Okay, that's interesting.
We have a bunch of cases where people like are migrating, and they have a database already. Like they're either coming from Cloud Foundry and they've used our old broker and they want to use our new broker, and they like want to register that thing inside of it and continue using it as a full-fledged resource where it's not just a Aaron pasted the link there. So it's functional for me, like the BYOB thing, but I haven't pushed it yet because I've just been busy with a lot of other things. But that's a capability that we were really looking for, because we see it as like a migration path for people that are using either Azure services already and want to use them with the broker, or are migrating from our old broker.
It's also a poor man's cluster-to-cluster sharing mechanism.
Yep.
Okay.
There isn't a whole lot in there.
There's nothing in there yet. So it's I took Paul's OSB kit and made a new broker, and I implemented MySQL Postgres, and I think Mongo. I'll have to go check. But like I said, I got busy and hadn't had a chance to push it to the repo yet.
Okay, is that it from you?
Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, I think next up was Doug.
Yeah, so before I get to my question, Jeremy, you expressed an interest, I think, in Jonathan's option number 2, which is basically allow people to create instances without necessarily being associated with like a broker. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think making them run unless Service Catalog is going to run it and install it as part of like the Service Catalog control plane. I feel like that's an extra step that seems like a little bit of overkill for something that like we're just going to create a resource that does nothing really other than exist and allow you to use via Service Catalog.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that was going to be my point. Was I know when we first started this whole work effort, there was a desire on some people's side to make user-provided services act and look like just like any other broker, which is why we created this UPS broker, and it does nothing but sort of echoes things back and stuff. But I agree with you that the overhead of having to go through all the extra work, having to not only just deploy it, but then the message exchanges going back and forth, then having to keep it up to date as the service broker spec itself changes. You know, as someone pointed out, I can't remember who, I think it was Jay, said it doesn't support asynchronous operations, and should it, does it need to? All these various things come into play. And I think it'd be a whole lot easier if we just treated service instances of UPS type as just something special. They're not associated with a broker, so we just skip the calls to it. We know what we're going to do, just copy the credentials, which are the parameters, into a secret and be done with it. It makes life a whole lot easier. And I think we can make them real in a much less cumbersome time frame. And so that'd be my preferred choice.
Is that it, Doug?
Yep, all done.
Okay, I think next up was Paul, who apparently is here.
Yeah, so I am not necessarily against the idea of making something that's like part of the API for Service Catalog that is a user-provided service. I think that if we want to go down that route, that we should talk about like how we're going to implement that. I do think that also taking on the responsibility of saying that like we're going to have this UPS broker thing, and it's going to be more than a toy and operatable in production is a very large task that I'd be hesitant to expand to be something that this SIG necessarily took on. If we wanted to do that, it might be a good idea to separate that broker into its own source project. And if we want to do that, I recently figured out what exactly the rules are for donating existing code, so there shouldn't be a problem there. It looks like I'm about to get kicked out of Zoom due to a weird dialogue message I'm seeing. So I'm not sure how long I'll be able to talk, but I think that's what I wanted to say before I got distracted by Zoom. UF.
Okay. I agree. Looks like Jeremy does as well. He +1 that making that a real thing is a lengthy and it's a lot of work, and it's going to be a lot of work in perpetuity because we have to support it for forever. That's why I was in favor of the second option of merely allowing a user to create an instance that is not necessarily attached to a class and a plan.
Yeah, I'm dubious about like having a single special case, but there's probably a way that we could do it without having weird like switch statements in a lot of different places. It's worth thinking about what the right way to do it is. I mean, that's what Cloud Foundry does for user-provided services for Cloud Foundry. They're basically like a special case. They don't go through the broker API. If people want to do that, I would try to keep it as simple as possible in terms of like what kind of feature set we want to build around them. Because at that point, we're doing product work in Service Catalog that's not strictly like around the integration with Open Service Broker API. So it's worth thinking about how far we'd want it to go and what features exactly you'd want to be able to use that way.
Scott says we should do everything in bash scripts. All against? No? Okay. Okay.
Oh, wait, I had a question.
Oh, sorry. Did I miss your hand?
That's okay. For number 2, if you make it directly, would it do anything special on bind, or is it just it's there? I guess I don't understand what number 2 would look like because I haven't used CF.
So you provide it with the credentials when you create the instance, probably via parameters, which is how I was thinking it would get passed in. And then when you create a binding to this instance, that's what it spits back out to you in the binding.
Oh, okay. So just like UPS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm probably going to do some investigation around option 2 then, because it seems like, in general, this is a feature we want to have, and that seems, like Doug said, the shortest way to getting it up and running. I can see how terrible it'll be. No? Sorry, Morgan. What? Okay. Sorry. Oh. I don't think we were serious about that, Morgan. Aaron.
So I want to ask, does anyone have a use case for running a bind on a user-provided service against the broker itself?
You mean actually needing the network interaction?
Yeah.
Isn't that what Jeremy's BYOB was kind of talking about? It would. I mean, you have that implemented, right, Jeremy? It like makes users for you. Yeah.
I think that makes sense for not in Kubernetes. So if you're like trying to bring a Kubernetes thing into Cloud Foundry, you'd want that. But if you're just in K8s, it doesn't matter.
I'm confused. Why would anybody need that message exchange to happen as opposed to just copying the secrets from the instance to the binding?
If they want new credentials.
To actually bind against those things.
But that defeats the purpose, doesn't it? I thought the whole point of UPS is I already have my credentials. I just want you to echo them back.
Yeah. I think it's like UPS++, where want that kind of like, I want to provide something that exists already, but I want it to actually do bindings and create new users, delete users,
Okay,
versus just like the static credentials.
Got it. Okay, so that's a different flavor of UPS. Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
So, I mean, we've had people ask us for that specific use case.
Okay.
Yeah, UPS++.
Okay. Speak now, forever hold your peace.
So one thing that I think we ought to do, since we clearly have different ideas for what feature we're talking about, is would somebody raise their hand to like collect all the use cases for this so that we can be super clear about which ones are which? Like, I've heard of at least two people calling, or heard of at least two different meanings ascribed to user-provided services in the last 30 seconds. So it will be helpful if we can know which ones we're talking about.
Okay. Aaron?
So I raised my hand again because I wanted to get my question answered. Obviously, we have the use case to run a bind over the network against a broker that already exists and already has an instance. Does anybody else have that use case? Okay, I'll take that as a...
I'm not certain
It's
exactly.
one that I've heard people talk about, but I can't point to a specific customer that I have that has it and has said that they want it.
So Aaron, I just want to make sure I definitely understand. I don't think we do, but I want to make sure I understand it. It sounds like all those usual message flows would still happen except the instance create. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, this is something that, Jonathan, it looks like you're going to put use cases together, so we'll work with you to make sure it's in there. But I think we have BYOB that's at least part of a solution here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's it for me.
Okay. Jeremy, could you ping me after the meeting and so we can take a look at your stuff? Okay. So once again, going once, going twice. Moving on to the next thing. Apparently today's the deadline for getting stuff into the GA roadmap. Seems
We were
kind of
supposed to
important.
talk about it and then bring back yes or yeses or no's for the list.
For the things on the list?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Morgan, you're kind of hard to hear.
Oh, yes, that was the idea. Let me touch with the microphone then.
Yeah, we were trying to get an agreement on what the scope is, but we're not picking a date to deliver it. But we're just all agreeing this is what we want in the GA.
So Morgan, can you share the roadmap? Here, let me get the URL.
This here?
Yeah. I want to make the font a little bigger. I think the point was to go through the list and see if everybody agrees that this is the list as of today anyway. And either remove stuff or add stuff if people want to do so.
So do folks want to groom through this list and discuss each one?
This is the list from the F face-to-face thing, right?
Yep.
Naturally.
Yeah.
So in the past, I think we've done sort of a grooming twice before. It doesn't seem like a good use of all of our times collectively based on experience. But it would be a good use of time if people have ideas, what they want to throw out. This would be a good time to talk about that.
I'm wondering if generic actions and generic broker actions can be punted out of GA and be GA++ sort of feature.
Yeah, I would view those more as things that are nice to have, and like if they happen before, for example, if someone wanted to go ahead and like work on generic actions this week, I would welcome that. I don't know that it has to block GA.
I agree.
Yeah, I had the same feeling for the some of the defaulting from my proposal.
Yeah.
Like custom classes and things like that, allowing people to create their own. Those seem like nice things, but they're not like breaking changes. If they go in later, it won't matter.
What about the SBCat migrated to kube control plugins? Do we want to block on that? Because then that might get hairy.
What do you mean migrated to?
Well, that's what it says. Porcelain CLI migrated to kube control plugins. So presumably,
but that already
rid
happened.
of the
Yeah,
standalone.
it's done. See all those lovely green check marks?
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Yeah, I got a key up at the top to explain all my emojis.
Okay, I misunderstood what that meant.
It meant, as far as I'm concerned, I think we nailed what we wanted for it. And some of the issues are just so you can see what was there, but like asynchronous bindings are in. Some of the doc stuff has already gone in.
Yeah, from my point of view,
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, from my point of view, I think the list looks good to me. Other than, I think I agree with pulling out the things you guys mentioned. I would like to add UPS brokers to the list with the caveat that if we could solve it without a huge complication. And I think Jonathan's on the right path there, but I'd like to get that in there before 1.0, because I do think that's kind of an important use case, at least for us.
So I want to ask stupid question just to confirm this. Are we set on namespace brokers in 1.0.0?
I hope that will happen in 0.2.
Okay, so we need it, right?
Yeah, I actually had put it into. I'm sorry, I did something dumb. When I read this list, I read 1.1.0 as 0.2. I don't know why, except that I'm jet lagged and I was quite tired when I was looking at this. So I added that into 1.1.0 mistakenly, so we can strike it from that. I would like to see namespace scope brokers before 1.0, but yes, I think that they should be a requirement for 1.0, and so should be present in this list.
And also, if I may, decide on plans for CRD. Probably should include decide on a migration plan as well.
Migration to a CRD backend or
Yeah.
CRDs.
Yeah. So
that is an excellent point and should be part of any conversation around CRDs.
Well, this one's bigger than the backend, right? Because we might replace aggregated API 987. So I don't know if we need to put it in here as much as we just need to remember it.
Can we talk about what you mean by migration? So I hear that and I think of, I have someone with an API server today that has V1 Beta 1 resources, and I want to translate those into the CRD backend or CRD storage without losing data. Is that what everybody thinks of?
Yes.
Cool.
Although I have a note. So my first spike is actually going to be straight to CRDs for the whole thing, no API server. And I am going to spend this week and probably some of next week to see if that's possible and see how dirty it is before I attempt CRD as a backing store.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot of confidence internally that this is not a big deal, and we can just kind of lift and shift the whole thing.
Including a data migration, Scott?
Yep. Be an export and an import, and the resources wouldn't change except for one small thing.
What's the small thing?
The sub-resource for the ref.
So I on another part of my professional life, like I had a communication forwarded to me with Stefan Schminsky that seemed to indicate to me that arbitrary sub-resources might be possible with CRDs. I will send that along to you, Scott.
Okay, that sounds good.
Since I think that's what you're talking about, the plan reference sub-resource, right?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I'll share that information with you.
Can you send that to everyone? Because I went to their stuff at KubeCon and they said no one wanted rando sub resources and it wasn't on their roadmap.
Interesting. All right, I will send that to the list.
So I've got another.
I do think I had a couple other points I wanted to make just really quick. I do think that CRD, like whether we're going to use it or not, is like correct to have figured out and implemented by 1.0. Like that's a good thing to be part of that milestone. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to talk through vis-a-vis like things that we have in this list that are called RBAC. Morgan, would you mind scrolling down just a little bit? So, those all have green check marks around them. The individual service class visibility, does that refer to the work that we're doing with the filtering and namespace scope brokers, or is that for something else? Because that's a really old issue that I think is probably mutated by now.
So when I marked some of these as done, I was trying to indicate that we seemed okay with the filtering of
Okay, cool.
And that achieved what we were hoping to do here. And then the only thing I moved out of scope was for instance level access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you. That's all I've got.
So I want to propose human readable plan and class names. Since we have SVCat and the plugin as a result, I feel like this is not required for 1.0 unless there's something that impacts a migration later.
Which one?
Human readable class and plan names.
I feel like so I think it should be required from a UX standpoint because I've had a lot of feedback that people think it's just really terrible the way that it works now with IDs as the class names. I don't think it would be a huge amount of work, probably less work than other things in this list. But I'd be willing to talk about it offline if you wanted.
What if we move it out of one and it can still be worked on? And if it gets in, it gets in.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Like, does anybody have like engineering cycles they're willing to devote to doing human readable class and plan names?
So remind me again, I thought this was just kind of going to get boiled out once we switched to CRDs in some respect because of the custom columns and all that stuff. Is that no longer the case, or am I misremembering?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what status custom columns for CRDs are in, to be quite honest with you.
Do CRDs require names to have the same restrictions as normal resources in Kubernetes? Things like
they have the exact same semantics naming wise.
Okay, so they're static or immutable, I should say. Okay.
Maybe this one is worth like we should talk about it and decide like after some more research whether we think it's in scope. Sounds like it depends a lot on what we think we would get if we went to CRDs.
Hey, Paul, I'm just wondering if SVCat was a kube control plugin that didn't that wasn't presented in such an awkward way, you know, with the extra words in the command line, so that people felt natural to or it felt more natural to actually use it to get back data and not use the generic kube control get, for example. They just use kube control service instance get or something like that. Do you think people's concern about IDs showing up would still be an issue because they wouldn't see them anymore? Or do you still think they're going to be bothered by using a special kube control syntax?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of hard to say. Like, I'm not sure that we can necessarily say without doing the experiment of letting people use it. And I do think that columns would make this less of an issue, like column support. So I'm not sure.
Okay, just curious.
Scott, as part of your endeavor to rewrite everything in only CRDs, would you feel comfortable taking on the burden of figuring out if this is something we get for free with that?
Yeah, I think Kibbles has actually been working on this. He's been writing a proposal that he may or may not be ready to share yet. But I would be happy to help corral it.
Yeah, or they were talking about the column stuff, right? I wasn't investigating
column
integration.
Sorry,
but I was sort of riffing off of Paul's issue that he made, trying to brainstorm, see what I think on the.
Yeah, I can add custom columns to my investigation of CRDs and report back. For sure.
Cool. So do we want to leave it at that for now? Because I feel like whether or not we get it for free is going to be the large determinant on how much effort we think this is.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll table that for now. Does anyone else have anything else to talk about in terms of 1.0?
So I think people just need to go through the list and make sure everything is in there that they need. Because I'm not sure I heard anybody say, yes, all my stuff is in there yet.
All my stuff's in there, but I wrote it, so, you know.
Okay.
It sounds like we're definitely going to take generic actions and generic broker actions out of the required list. But I didn't hear any other definitely remove.
How are those two things different? I'm not sure that I understand the difference.
One is on the service instance and one is on the broker, like the action that's being done. So for instance, if the generic action is ping, you would ping the service instance.
Okay.
Or you would ping the actual.
So we decided generic broker actions were a distinct thing at the face-to-face, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I remember now. Thank you.
Yeah, I could definitely see those being moved out of GA, given that who knows how long it's going to take for the spec to solidify.
Yeah, I think we want to move to GA, and those are big, hairy features that need more investigation, I think.
If you look at the agenda, all the things that people agreed they want to change about this wiki, I've laid out there, and then after this meeting's over, I'll update the wiki page.
Okay, does someone want to move those to 1.1.0 then?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Cool, thanks. Anything else in terms of milestones? Okay. What's the next thing on the agenda?
Core OS Operators by Scott.
Yeah, did anyone get to read about Core OS Operators?
I took a look at it. It didn't seem like it was exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
I
look
have
at them
a
like
very deep background on this subject if you have questions. But I did not come prepared today to like explain the concept to this group. So if you would like me to do that, I'm happy to, but I can't do it with no prep.
All right, I can do it with like, I'll give the TLDR, and then Paul can correct me if I have it wrong. But the CoreOS Operator SDK is a way so that you can do lifecycle management of in-cluster resources in the way that we might launch a broker in a Kubernetes cluster and then ask that broker to inject things back into the cluster, into that namespace. So it's for in-cluster resources like etcd and the etcd operator, or memcache. It's a resource that's running in your cluster, not an external resource.
Yeah, kind of great. So I think when I read through the, like I'd used etcd operator a little bit before, but when I read through the like the blog posts, and I went to something at KubeCon and heard about them. I feel like the differentiation is like the operator stuff is more focused on things you're going to do on cluster, and like to me, service catalog, more the brokers, are really about things you're probably not going to do on cluster. They're going to be somewhere else outside of the cluster. And I think there's parallels between how you might use them and like the benefit, but I think they're serving different use cases.
So I'll mention a counter example. We've seen some customers that have taken this concept and, whether right or wrong from a use case perspective, have basically applied it to doing brokery things without using OSB API. Data point.
So I think that Scott and Jeremy, like you guys articulated what I think the intent of like operators is in general, that like just to be really specific, when we talk about what an operator is, it's basically like there's two parts of it. There's a CRD that models the like piece of software that you want the operator to manage, and then there's a controller that is watching that CRD and doing the things that users express with that. And as an example, like I think the first use of this concept was that CoreOS I seem to think this was about a year and a half ago, was building an operator for etcd that you can say, in my namespace, I want there to be an etcd instance, and the operator handles the work of like watching that CRD that indicates that for that specific piece of software, and then putting etcd into their namespace and handling things like the concept now includes other operations like etcd backup, etcd restore, and it's really about delivering things in like a white box fashion into your namespace. Does that make sense to folks?
That's what I understand.
For me personally, like I look at service catalog probably as what you would use for external integrations. But with that said, that's my opinion as some dude. Like Red Hat has obviously delivered to well-known and shipped with OpenShift brokers that deliver things into your namespace. So there's probably like a gray area in terms of, as the operator concept becomes more well-known, whether people view things the same way or not. But that's just my own personal opinion.
I have a question. Those OpenShift brokers that reach their noodly appendages back into your Kubernetes and do things, do you consume those resources via bindings, or do you access them directly?
So you consume them via binding.
Mm-hmm.
So the second question about the operators is, could we leverage them to talk to OSB things?
Well, one thing that I have that I can say really quickly that I've just remembered is that I've been discussing like the operator concept with folks at Red Hat for a while in terms of the similarities between like what an operator does and what a broker does. And I know of at least one customer whose name I can't share that already has an operator that want to add availability of their services via the service catalog. And so there's probably like a pattern that, well, there's a pattern that we might see emerge of operators that also have an open service broker API REST surface, so they can be used off cluster for like hosted things. There is no reason that one piece of software can't be both.
Yeah, when I was looking at this, I was thinking going both directions where the core OS operator maybe can register with service catalog as well. And so you could, when you do SVCat lists or something, you would also get your operators.
That sounds kind of neat.
Right, so service catalog doesn't have to be just married to OSB. It could be services that are not yours, like not written by you or something.
Yeah, I'm very hesitant to expand the scope of Service Catalog beyond Open Service Broker API. I kind of wish that we had chosen a more specific name for it, in fact, because there are like 2 or 3 other things that people are calling service catalogs that I've seen in the Cube ecosystem recently. But either way you slice it, say that we're amenable to like expanding the scope. Say that someone else builds something that they don't want to like conflate or have an integration with Service Catalog. Like that's probably also inevitable given enough time. One thing at a more meta level that I've wondered is like, will there ever be a need for something that you can say, tell me about all the ways that I can pick something to put into my cluster or use, like the meta catalog of which mechanisms are available to me.
Yep.
But I don't intend to derail this entire SIG by bringing that up. I'll just share that with folks.
More the reason to go to GA, right? Like lock it down, ship it, and then start iterating.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Anything else on that note? Kind of move along then. This one's also Scott.
Howdy. So after KubeCon, it occurred to me that we are a group that any individual can go and represent the group without the group's consent. And should we put some sort of process in place to put some more auditing? How does the group feel about that?
Represent the group. Do you mean speaking in an official capacity as I'm a member of SIG Service Catalog, blah, blah, blah? Or do you just mean like just talking about Service Catalog in general?
More like direct representation of the SIG. Like speaking for us.
So at KubeCon then, this would have been the hands-on and the deep dive, but not necessarily the other presentations?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Act Doug, Act Paul. Doug, you're up.
Yeah, so I think if you were specifically standing in front of people saying, I represent this group and I'm speaking for them, then I would agree. It would be nice if we can get some sort of check. And it doesn't have to be formal, just let us take a look at it in advance. But I think those times are pretty rare. I think in most cases, people should not be presenting themselves as representing the group. They're representing themselves as a member of the group. The only case I could think of recently where someone was representing the group itself was when I gave SIG updates, a 5-minute blurb at KubeCon, just to let people know what we're working on. And then even then, you need to be very clear when you're talking for the group versus giving your own opinion. And obviously, when you're giving your own opinion, you're free to say whatever you want, but you just need to make it very clear where that line is between the two.
Is that it, Doug?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, at Kibby, at Carolyn, Paul, you're up.
Yeah, so I agree with Doug. I'm curious to know, like, what, and you don't have to, like, share any names, but, like, what context did you think of this realization in?
Just thinking. It's a couple things, and like there's an article, I think some news surfaced around, Microsoft releases Service Broker, and then Google wrote the Service Broker, or Service Catalog, things like that, right? Like how these things get mentioned might matter to us.
Yeah, unfortunately, like, there is little that we could do from preventing someone that didn't understand a situation from writing an article or blog posts that, like, conveyed their mistaken understanding. I guess, like, that seems slightly different than whether somebody is giving a talk and saying, I'm here representing the SIG. I think we can do something about that, and that's actually a good segue into what I would like to talk about next, which is a group charter. But we can definitely have some kind of rules around that. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about misinformation being written, right? Like, I doubt we'd be able to get journalists to, like, come to some of us and sign off on their stuff that they wrote or whatever.
It could be even simple audits from the group if we're going to do a presentation that there's just no factual errors.
As far as, like, a SIG update or a SIG session at KubeCon, I think that is very reasonable.
Because these are the peers in Kubernetes that are going to determine the SIG's worth. And if that content isn't valid, it makes us look bad.
Couldn't the same be said of any presentation anybody gives about Service Catalog?
Sure.
Seems like a lot of work to bet any presentation anybody gives.
I don't think that's what we're asking for. Like, at KubeCon, I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking for me, but, like, I would have loved to have been able to know what we were going to say ahead of time for the intro and the deep dive. And then maybe had a chance to, like, add some more information about, like, info for new contributors, or just maybe talk about, like, our plans for 1.0 or something. I would have had fun. I would have loved to participate in that too. And KubeCon feels very official,
So, well, that stuff may have sounded very official. My understanding is that those were rather fly-by-night. They were...
I don't know.
My understanding of the process was they said they wanted to have deep dives for the individual SIGs, but they didn't reach out to us. It was up to us to reach out to them and be like, hey, we want to do one for SIG Service Catalog. And I believe it was Morgan and Kibby who took them up on that. Speaking of which, Kibby, you're up.
Yeah. As somebody that gave one of them without having, like, shared the slides and such, I do think going forward it would definitely be beneficial. So I apologize for that. I definitely should have reached out more to you guys. I kind of free winged it towards the end there. So yeah, I think for the next KubeCon it would be certainly great if we had just a sort of process. Maybe let's just say, 2 weeks in advance or something, have a presentation to the group. Just if we formalize that, then we can feel like everybody has a say in that it's being an accurate representation of our group.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yep.
Okay, I think, Carolyn, did you have anything else to say?
No, I cheated and just talked without waiting for you to say anything.
Okay, Aaron, you're up.
So yeah, I want to give a big +1 to Carolyn and Kibby. That'd have been nice to just see and maybe comment if there's factual errors. But also, I will give a real kind of use case, if you will, of talking about tech and not the group. So like many of us, I'm giving a presentation, and I've given a bunch about the service catalog tech. I'm giving one on Thursday. And the general outline of those talks is, at the beginning I say, I work in the service catalog group, and here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about this tech, this concept, this concept. I never say that I'm not speaking for the group, but also I never say things like, here's where the group is, or the group thinks this, or whatever. So going forward, I probably will start saying that I'm not speaking for the group, I'm speaking for tech only. That might be another good thing we should put in the charter. But I would really hate to have to go through the group to get sign off on any presentation related to service catalog that I make. And I would also really hate to have to review every presentation that anyone gives.
I give way too many talks personally for that to be realistic on either side of like sharing slides and or like looking at other people's slides. But I think that Scott, what your motivation seems to be is around like when there is something that is like a community event, that there's an official update from the SIG, that it's not about do you need permission? It's about whether it's about giving the people in the group to be crowdsourced for fact checking and stuff like that. Because it's easy for those things to maybe have a verbiage that sounds weird for somebody, or that if you are just a human being and you make a mistake, someone else might catch it. Is that specifically what you're really thinking about?
Yeah, and it could also be dumb things like you have the wrong logo for the company that you say you work with.
Microsoft.
Yeah. That's all.
Any other comments on that, or should we segue into Paul's thing?
So do we have any guides, consensus, anything here?
I mean, it seems to me the consensus is that for things that are explicitly representations of the group's opinion, like those 2 sessions at KubeCon, we would want to have at least some mechanism to make the slides available for review to the group a couple weeks in advance.
Yeah, I think that's well put.
Yep.
And then do we want to encode that in our charter somehow? What does that mean?
Let's have the discussion now about what a charter is, and maybe we can examine that question. So the charter document is something that is a concept that the steering committee decided on, for that there should be a single place where the roles, rules, and responsibilities of the things that make up a SIG are written down for each group. There's a template one that we can use as a starting point, but the idea is that every SIG will do this, so that there is a real up-to-date accounting of what the rules, roles, and responsibilities and processes are for each group. So this seems like a good candidate for something that we could have some verbiage around in the charter that said, I think, Jonathan, you put it really well. I'm going to try to paraphrase the wording that you used. And I think you basically said something close to, if you are giving a update in the community at a community event, that you should have slides shared 2 weeks in advance so that others from the group can like fact check and review and stuff. Does that basically correspond to what you said?
Yeah, I just added the stipulation that this was only for presentations where you're explicitly representing the group as a whole and not really presenting as a private individual.
Right. So I think that would be a perfect piece of verbiage to put into the SIG's rules. So I would say, like in that example, I would definitely put that as part of the charter. Let me do this. I'll locate the template and paste it into the chat. One sec.
Just heads up, we're kind of running up on time.
Tell you what, I'll send it to the group then. You're right. We're just about out of time for today. Does anybody have an interest in like taking the lead on being the one that writes down the charter?
I mean, I can write down this specific thing.
Okay.
And we can talk about it next week, I guess.
All right. That sounds good. So maybe you can start a template document, Jonathan. Once I email the template to the group, and like reply with where that document is and dump the template text into it, add this rule, and then we'll start a group discussion around it. Sound good?
My microphone button. How about I just open it up as a PR in the repo?
Okay, it goes to the committee, or I'm sorry, the community repo under the SIG folder.
Oh, okay.
If you want to open the pull request there and we can do it in pull request, that's also fine. You can do it however you want if you're the one that does it.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, thanks.
Okay. I guess that's it for today then. Thanks everyone for coming, and I guess we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Adios.
See you, everybody.